First and foremost, I just want to thank the board and the administration for being here tonight. Obviously, we added an additional meeting to everyone's schedule, so I appreciate y'all coming and being here. I think, obviously the committee is still in the process. I think they have one more committee meeting. So we don't want to completely drop a nuclear bomb in their process, but I do think that we as a board would probably like to have an open discussion a little bit to take maybe some of the anxiety out of the community as far as maybe timelines and some of the things that have been talked about in the RSP study. So I appreciate y'all coming tonight. Like I said, I appreciate your thoughts, but I just want to kind of have an open discussion among the board and just kind of visit about what we've seen from the RSP study and from the committee, and maybe find some common ground to, like I say, put the community at ease about some of the things that have been proposed or some of the things that we want to talk about that have been proposed. So with that, I think I'll open it up to any other board member that wants to say anything. We do appreciate the process. Obviously last week was a busy week. We had a Monday night board meeting. We had a lot of community input at that, which is extremely valuable. And then Wednesday and Thursday night, we had pretty good turnouts from the community for our public input night and had a lot of good comments there, a lot of good conversations. So I appreciate the admin team working with RSP and getting that all set up. I know that is a lot of extra work to get those meetings all set up and try to calculate data and try to meet all the needs of all the stuff that the board's asking you guys to get us as far as information. So Dr. Dominguez, do you want to add anything before we kind of open the floor?
No, I just appreciate you guys also on just the tenacity of it. It's not going to be easy, and then trying to navigate it and look and vet out different ideas, different opportunities for programming and success of the students, and that's what we're here for. So success of everybody, students, engage, enrich, empower, also staff and community as a whole. So no, I'm excited. It's still good.
So I guess I'd like to open it up to all the board members to just kind of speak a little bit about maybe some of your thoughts, and then maybe after everyone's had the opportunity to do that, we might find some common ground on some things that would help the committee kind of in their last meeting, or give them just to take a direction and take a little bit of the anxiety out of the community. Whoever wants to start.
That's all. Be like anything. I'm glad that we're doing this tonight. I think that there's a lot of fear in the community, and fear is not a good place to be or to come from. So I hope that as we discuss tonight, that people will see that as a board, we truly do have the best interest of the district, the kids, the teachers, everyone at heart. And we're not taking this lightly, and we're not making a decision, a snap judgment. We don't want to do this again, and we want it to be right. So I'm glad that John suggested we have this meeting tonight where we can get together and the public can hear the same things that we've been thinking in our heads.
I'll go. So I kind of, where I'm at now is where I was when we started this. I think a good thing to do would be my suggestion is we focus the last meeting of RSP. I would like to see, do the grade reconfiguration, the K5, 6-8, 9-12. I would like to see how that changes the percent of the building utilizations. So redo the reconfiguration, redraw the boundary lines, stop right there. I'd like to see those numbers on how that affects any of the percentages at that point on for building utilization. I'd also like if someone could give me a dollar amount, and I know it's totally a ballpark, an estimate. It's too quick to try to get accurate numbers, but on what it would cost to add on to Kenneth Henderson to make it viable, so we can make the two schools comparable, keep two middle schools. And I know maybe like we talked, maybe this is a stair step model where we do the classrooms because that's what we can afford in the budget without having to go to a bond. Or I don't know, maybe it does have to go to a bond if it's too much money. Because I think everybody in this room knows a bond's not gonna pass. We all know that. We all pay property taxes and all that. And then maybe stair step in the additional stuff needed. If we need an auditorium and that, we stair step that in over like a 3-year or 5-year plan to make those schools more equitable. And then I really feel that we need in this community another or more early childhood. I've had a lot of people and friends of my people I know that have tried to get their children into early childhood and they can't because it's full. So I do think that's a need for the district as well. But that's where I would like to go. At least that's my opinion right now. No school closures right now until we see all the numbers.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I missed Wednesday and Thursday, of course, because I was in Topeka. But I'm pretty much on board with what Randy's saying. I'd like to see the boundary state. I'd like to see reconfiguration of the grades. I'd like to see what it would take to make Kenneth Henderson so we'd have two comparable middle schools. I spent the weekend going through 400 and some emails. Most of them were the same, but there were a few that were individualized and did read through those and did respond to all of them. As far as closure of schools, I think that's something we need, I'd like to pump the brakes, so to speak, a little bit right now. Let's look at this boundary study. Let's look at reconfiguration of grades. What would it do to the schools that we currently have and go from there? That makes sense.
Good, sir.
I understand. I can agree with what everybody said. I've been in the meetings all the way from the beginning till this Thursday, but I think there's some wise fiscal things we need to look at and process through. I understand the need to look at the numbers. Moving, the two intermediate centers, what that looks like. And reconfiguring some of those boundaries. I think they did some of that work for us, and so I don't think it would be too much for them to bring those numbers to us with some boundary stuff. As things go with that, definitely trying to understand. I think there will be a need, time to make a hard decision for this board, but I think it needs to be done for the long term. We started this boundary study talking with, okay, what are we going to be like in 5 or 10 years? And if we continue to run at 50% capacity for 5 or 10 years, that's going to just dwindle down and going to be a problem. That we'll get into a situation where we have a fire sale that will have to happen in 5 or 10 years. So are we smart preparing for the future now and making those kind of decisions and whatnot? Making some adjustments. I've talked a little bit at a time about stair stepping things into place, what that would look like. Nobody likes change, but change is inevitable, and it's something we need to make sure we evaluate carefully and do the right thing for the entire school system. 7,000 kids that we're put in charge of being responsible for. And so, and we'll just, I don't know if that makes any sense or not. Looking at the numbers, of course, there's some things that I don't know what we can and can't give out information wise. I've had a lot of questions. People, where's the financial data we keep talking about? Where is these other things? And I don't know if that's possible to release that stuff or not. Those are some things I think would be smart to let people know where we're coming from and the decisions we have to make from. And I know Jessica was waiting to get a little bit more direction before she put some extra time into those things, but I think that'd be smart to present. If we go with this option, this is the financial impact. If we go with this option, here's the financial impact, if that's possible. And I hate to throw more work on you, Jessica, but I think that'd be helpful to bring everybody along. And question I had asked myself when I made tough and hard decisions within the church world and the churches I've been a part of is give people the reason why. And so if we give them the reason why, they're more likely to understand the decisions that we're making and what we have to do. And so if we fill in that question, I think that will help a lot of people understand, where we're gonna go. What do taxes need to be at? How many mills are we gonna have to raise it if we stick with the same model? Nothing changes. And that tax is inevitable for everybody. It's not just one area of town, it's everybody. And so what does that look like? And so there's discussions that need to be had as far as that goes. And I think that will be something that everybody needs to understand as well as we present this and as we look at the different options. What does this look like? And so, and I think I was extremely disappointed, to be honest with you, in some of the emails that I've gotten because there's some false information in that. The fact that we're raising class sizes is a complete lie. Whether anybody wants to disagree with me or not, I'm telling you, I'm a teacher. I looked at the data. I got the enrollment numbers, and with the reconfiguration, we're not raising class sizes. We're getting them where they could be and where they need to be. And so that's a teacher saying that, okay, and whatnot. So that was something I was very disappointed in, some of the false information that went out there. One thing I'll say in here publicly, and I've said it in several conversations I've had, but often we don't know what could be until we get to where we're going to be. And so a lot of times there've been a lot of discussion we've heard about the effects of culture and the effects of all this other stuff, but you don't know what could be. And I caution everybody when we make decisions and when we hear conversations. I was at an elementary school this last week, one of the in-city schools, and went and did a tour of the school building. And some of the perceptions with the conversations that have gone on, that we're better, we're not better, those kind of things we have to be very careful of as we have conversations as board members. And so a good reminder for us all that we are here to serve everybody. And just something that we have to think of as going forward. I don't know if that helps or not, but those are just things that are in my brain. It's just disheartening a little bit. And I understand the emotional things from different school changes I've had to make in my time, but I've always gotten to something better. And if we learn to make the best of every situation, and especially as I've looked at the staff, it has been disheartening with some of our culture the way it is. As a teacher, where I taught, I had to make the best of every situation. Didn't matter where I was at. When I signed a contract for a job, the HR job, I was promised a job somewhere in the school system with 82 elementary schools. And I went down and went through a job fair and had to figure out where we could go. I was hired at a school and we just went from there. And then every situation, whatever came my way, I was there for the kids and I kept my eyes focused on the kids. I'm there to teach the kids, whatever is set before me. And we have to make sure we keep that in mind as we're having our conversations. And that's why I try to direct people when I've had those conversations. So whether or not that helps, we're here to teach kids. You get an education to help kids get to a better place. We are here. We all campaigned on the idea of doing what's best for the school system as a whole. And so unfortunately, we're sitting here, but this is life. But anyway, that's my thoughts, 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Nathan. So as we've gone through this process, both in committee discussions and the community meetings, the one theme that keeps coming back up is the desire to eliminate the intermediate. That's one thing that I've heard over and over again. And I'll say the only reservation I've heard expressed about the grade reconfiguration is I did have one committee member that voted, that was in that night that we voted, and they said to me, had I known that voting for K5, 6, 8 grade reconfiguration would lead to a discussion about closing our school, I don't know if I would have voted the same. So I understand. But even at the community meetings, we had people speak from all 4 of the grade schools that vocalized opposition to closing their schools. But even with that, several of those folks also expressed support for the grade reconfiguration. I think the tough decision that we have before us is to do the things that the grade reconfiguration that we're talking about. It initiates a much more difficult conversation about what to do with grade levels, with the elementaries. I mean, we've seen the statistics. If we go and Bernine sits and Charlestone's become intermediate centers and no other changes are made anywhere else in the district, we'll have 13 elementary schools. And I believe our building utilizations, if we could evenly spread our students out amongst those 13 schools, we'd have about 50% utilization. And so I think that presents an issue for us in being able to operate fiscally responsibly. At the same time, I've had many people reach out to me and say, these are tough decisions, but I hope you make a decision that's best for the whole school district. So I think we've got a lot to get through to determine what that really looks like. There's a lot. So what I'm hoping for, Randy, you hit on that, what's your thoughts about the committee, I believe. And, I expressed at the last committee meeting that my hope for the committee is for them to be at a place with a group that they are comfortable arriving on a recommendation to the board as to what they want to see the long-term vision of our school district to be. Whether that's in favor or not in favor of grade reconfiguration, 1 middle school, 2 middle schools, whatever that is, right? I think it's the work, and I understand, and because I'm a very data-driven, detail-oriented person, and it's hard for me to make decisions and without a lot of data to back it up. But what I see we're really asking for, at least what I hope for this committee to do, is to cast the vision for us, to point us in the direction that they would like to see. I think we as a board are tasked with a lot of work after that happens. If we know the vision that the school community wants, then we have a deep dive into a whole lot of items to analyze, not only our own finances. I think we've got to get to a better understanding of our the data between new housing development in the community and our student enrollment. I think our community is growing, and it has grown. I've lived here for 10 years. Garden City's grown population and otherwise in the last 10 years. And it's going to continue to grow. And we know that the city and economic development have a very detailed, well laid out plan to see that growth happen. But I think we've really got to understand the dynamics of the next generation, people who are going to be having kids, who are going to be moving into our community, and what family dynamics look like, and then demographic and statistics look like moving forward. I did ask RSP. I asked Rob at RSP after the first night of the meeting. I said, your projections are that over the next 5 years, we're going to have 160 students declining. I believe that's the number. It's 160 students declining in our overall population. And I said, what did you base that off of in regard to growth in the community? And he told me that's based off of 500 dwelling units being built in our community. If we see 500 units built, according to them, we'll have a population decline of 160 students. Presumably any less development than that would yield a larger population decline. Anything above that would either slow that decline or put us into a position of growing student population. I think we've got to really understand that, because I think whatever we do, we have to make sure that we're making decisions to right size our district, not only for our current population and the near projected trends, but I do think Garden City is going to continue to grow. I think there's a lot of things on the horizon for us, and I think we're going to see very good growth in our community. And there may be, and I believe there'll be a time where we're going to have to go to the community and ask for a bond issue to build new elementary school, and possibly do some substantial work to our grade school, our middle schools to accommodate that growth. But I think that how we get here has to be managing things well today and managing our resources today and our facilities and everything we have on hand today to set ourselves up to be in the right position for the future. We have to also manage this and figure out this is the master plan. Ultimately, I think what we're about to embark into is a master plan, because we go to the community in X number of years and ask for a mill levy increase to build an elementary school. It has to be seen by the community on the front end that this was all part of the plan. We made consolidations when it was necessary to make fiscally responsible decisions so that we're well positioned to be in the right place to grow in the future. And if we don't make the right choices and communicate that message really well to our community, I think we could potentially be setting up this future boards for a struggle in people's perception that we were making the wrong choices today and that we made bad choices and now we're trying to go back on those bad choices. And that's not the situation where any of us are trying to accomplish. So I really feel like coming out of this last committee meeting and receiving the recommendation of that committee is really just the start of a lot of work by our board in figuring out what the next decision is. I got lots of other things, comments about middle school options and everything else we can dive into later, but that's my initial thoughts, opening thoughts, I guess.
Jackie?
There's a lot of things that can look good on paper, but that doesn't mean that it can be realistic and that it can be done. I think the K-5, 6 through 8 option is highly favored. But with that, we still have some buildings that will be underutilized. So we'll have to look at what that looks like. Definitely closing, doing that. I think we do need to, be responsible and close some grade schools before we're forced to. We don't want to be in the position that we have to financially close things rather than choosing what we want to utilize and close. With 4 grade schools and the 2 intermediate centers, that lays a lot of staff, a lot of employees that have to be, put somewhere. And I don't think, realistically, I don't think that's something we want to do. I think we will lose a lot of staff. That's a lot of people to put places, and no matter what's decided, somebody's not going to. I'm sure everybody has received the same emails and phone calls. But there's a lot in favor of keeping schools open, and there's a lot in favor of knowing that we need to close some, and we need to do it sooner than later. There's some schools that, that the maintenance was neglected on. That's not something that was something that was decided by a different administration, different board. Why that happened, none of us know, but it did. We just have to look at it step by step and see realistically what is feasible and what is not, and just kind of prioritize those options and what gradually. I think it definitely needs to be a gradual thing and not an all of a sudden thing, but it's going to take a lot of work to figure it all out.
Thank you, Jackie. So this thing evolved pretty quick. We went from a boundary study, which I think is pretty cut and dry. We would have probably had a decision made as a board by now how we were going to adjust our boundaries for real soon in May when we voted on it. To adjust our boundaries to best utilize and our buildings. And then, the committee went and voted like, hey, we'd like to do the reconfiguration or look at the reconfiguration at the same time as the boundary study. And I would agree with Andy that I think there could have been better communication in that committee meeting that if you vote to reconfigure, you're basically voting to, in a way, close buildings or repurpose buildings. Because the struggle I have, I hear the community says, hey, a K-5, 6-8, 9-12 model is better for our students. I agree with that. It takes one of our transitions out. Anytime you transition students to a new building, there's social anxiety, getting to know my teachers, getting to know my new friends. So if we can build more consistency and keep them in a building longer, less transitions, I think for educationally, I think that's great for our students, and for our student success is what we're all here for. But that, I struggle with that from a standpoint of, if we do go to a K-5, 6-8 model, in my mind, this is just one board member, but at that point, we do need to repurpose or close buildings, because at that point we have Charles Stones and Bernadine Sitz that we're either gonna close them or turn them into an elementaries, possibly. So then we're adding elementaries, so we're needing more staff and we're utilizing our buildings less. So I struggle with that concept. I'm on board with the concept of K-5, 6-8, 9-12. I think that's the best model educationally, but that decision to go that way, in my mind, is going to have to be made out of operational efficiency. And the operational efficiency is we're gonna have to close some schools or repurpose some buildings and different things. I wonder, I just wonder if the conversation would be different if, if the committee would have said, hey, instead of saying, hey, we're gonna have to close 4 schools to move to this model. I wonder if the conversation would have been different if the committee said, how much is USD-457 going to have to raise the mill levy to operate at the same way we are today in the future? And I wonder how the conversation would have evolved differently if it would have been presented that way. Because, I mean, I know public education isn't a business, but public education does have a budget. And as a board, we voted to do a compensation study. We want to take care of our people. We voted to do that. We have obviously school buses. We have nice facilities. Everybody wants the district to be well represented, and the board has, for the most part, voted in favor of that. But there comes a point, I think, where if our expenses continue to go up and our budget continues to decline, because some of our funding, I'm not an expert in this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the funding for the district comes off of our student count. So if our student count continues to decline and our expenses continue to incline, at some point we're going to cross, right? So as a board, we have to make some tough decisions to say, all right, what do we have to do operationally to become more efficient to match our spending? And that's the tough question for all of us, right? That's why we're all around this table. That's why the data that has been presented to the committee and what's been presented to the public, that's why that information's out there, to be honest with you, is we probably can't continue to operate at the level we're operating at unless we go to the taxpayer and say, hey, we're gonna have to increase taxes. So I don't know what the right answer is. I appreciate, like I say, I appreciate all the hard work. I appreciate the committee. I appreciate everybody that's worked on this. And I do agree with Andy that the board needs a direction from the committee as what direction we want to go. And then our work is really going to begin. We're going to know what data we need to ask for from the administration. We're going to know what numbers we need to dive into. And it's going to help us get to that end result. If it was strictly business, and I think it would be a simple decision. But it's not. I mean, we have families, we have teachers, we have staff, we have students. We have so many people that are affected, by the decision that we make. I mean, if it was strictly, we had 10 buildings running half full and we could operationally efficient, through operational efficiencies, shut some, pare that down, that would be so easy. But it's not that easy. There's people's lives, there's student success, there's so many different dynamics to this. So I do think we need to get to a point where we kind of know what direction. Hopefully the committee can steer us in a direction, and then we'll do our work. With that being said, I think that one thing that the public is anxious about is the timeline that was put out by RSP. And I think that timeline was initially put out by RSP for the boundary study only, not the reconfiguration. So I do want to just kind of get a consensus of the board tonight and put the public at ease that we're probably not going to vote for anything, for any changes in May of 2024, which is laid out on the schedule, just to make the public be aware that, hey, this board is going to slow down the process. We're going to peel back the onion one layer at a time. We're going to work to make the best decision for our community for the next 10 to 15 years. And we're going to try to make the right decision in that. And if it takes us a year to make that decision, if we have to slow it down that much to get all the data and to make the right decision, that this board's committed to making the right decision, not making a fast decision. And I think that's something that we need to convey to the public. And, I want you guys to chime in on that, just so that the public's not anxious that the decision is going to be made in, 10 days or whenever our May meeting is.
But I think that benefits us to slow it down on many levels, but right now we're at this point where, well, I don't know who's gonna be right.
Right.
City's gonna be right, or the RSP is gonna be right in our student enrollment and the growth. Right now, we can't say who's gonna win that battle. And, so the longer that this goes, if we reevaluate it, or it takes 2 years, you're going to see the numbers start to play out. Either the city was right, that yes, we're increasing and it's causing student growth, or RSP's right in saying, well, with the dynamics and the world we live in today, we're still declining. So I don't see that as a negative to, I don't want to say drag our feet, but really evaluate the process. So I think that's a good thing.
And I think the thing that we have afforded to us as a board to have a little extra time is we have a great school system that's working today. We're educating our kids, you know what I mean? We have, it's not like we're pressed in a situation to make that decision tomorrow and our students are suffering because we don't make that decision tomorrow. I mean, we're educating kids today. Our district is running. So I think that affords us just a little bit more time to kind of peel back the onion and look at it a little deeper.
I would echo what you said about the timeline. I've said, to folks about this, we've talked that having a timeline and that we have is important. It helps keep us on task. It keeps this process moving forward. It sets goals. It keeps us focused and keeps this process moving toward a resolution. But I also don't think a timeline and dates on his calendar should drive decisions if we're not ready to. So I would say, yes, I definitely agree. I don't feel comfortable making any votes in May about this. I do, like I say, want to receive a recommendation from the committee, but I think from there, we start asking more questions and digging into scenarios. But I would like to see us as a board develop a timeline, whether it's a 8-month timeline, 1-year timeline, or what, and we set some key milestones for ourselves, some decision-making points. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what those milestones necessarily need to be, but I think we should lay something out for ourselves to keep us focused on this. The other point, Randy, as you were mentioning about the data, I've talked to economic development, talked to the city, talked to RSP. I think there's a perception that the city, the information we've got from economic and city and the information we're getting from RSP are opposing each other. And I don't really think that's the case. I think they're looking at similar data points. I think they're seeing things. Obviously, I think economic development is privy to some potential growth opportunities that only they would know about. And so that probably influences their outlook differently than somebody who's looking at more public data sources. But I do think they're seeing things similarly. They're just different. Maybe their projections are a little different. I appreciate what we've gotten from RSP so far. I know that the more we ask, the more we've asked, at least in the last few weeks, about some of the backup as to their data, the more they've been providing, which shows me the backup is there. But I think we just got to keep asking. You know, we've got, I mean, every decision in this process is going to yield a whole nother set of decisions, and every scenario is going to create new questions. And so I don't know to what extent we have RSP committed contractually for services after this last meeting. If they're, I mean, but I'd like to kind of have a better understanding of what all they're providing to us under their contract currently after we get through this committee process. And then we kind of decide on how we're gonna, because I think data is gonna need to be coming from, I mean, we've got a lot of resources at our disposal between this, you know, the ability for any kind of economic development to do, you know, for their statistical work and what we've got with RSP. I think we got to continue to use both of those.
I think we need to be very cautious about taking too long, though. I mean, I understand slowing the process down, not making the decision. I would have some concerns about continuing to have the contract with RSP go on and on, because that's just more dollars that we keep going in. So I understand the timeline they have presented as far as presenting something to us. It doesn't mean we'll have to make a decision on it. It means that they will present the data that the committees come up with and all of that to us. Basically, at that point, concluding their services to us. And then from there, we can make the decisions, the decisions and the discussion can go from there. So I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on that. But I think because of the work that will need to happen, whatever decision's made, you can't build a school in a month. So if we're looking at a 2-year window or a 3-year window, we at some point have to make a decision to go forward. How are we going to do this? How is this going to all function? And so we can't drag it out forever. And that's the thing we have to be very aware of as we go forward.
And I think, you know, at the projected rate, 160 students, 5 years, right? That was the projection. That doesn't scare me. I mean, really, out of 7,000 kids, 160, that number doesn't scare me enough that I feel like I have to make an immediate decision. I feel like that decline is low enough, if the projections are accurate, for us still to have a little time to make a good decision.
I would agree that slowing the timeline down is going to be beneficial for us as a board to get the data, to look at it. Also, RSP has delivered us all of this information, and now we know the data we need to look at, the types of data. And if we can continue to work with the city economic development, the county, to build stronger, better relations with them, I think it's a win for all of us as we do that. And I agree with Randy that the 160 budget-wise, I'm sure Jessica could flip that number out and tell us how much that is, and I'm sure it would scare all of us to pieces, but it is not like we're gonna lose 500 kids this year, 500 kids next year, and we need to make something or gain 500. So I think if we could, maybe we need to do something boundary-wise to get Jenny Barker not at 100 and whatever % capacity, and then take 5-6 months to come up with what we want to do after we have a recommendation from the committee would be in everyone's benefit.
I agree. You reminded me of something when you said that. I think the immediate thing that should happen is we need to deal with Jenny Barker's issues of overcrowded. Because I think we do have the space to make that a little more movable. I guess, but that, I got that. But for them to continue to run at 130% capacity probably isn't efficient for them either, so.
Something else we need to consider. The 4th grade schools over the next 6 years, there's $11 million of maintenance that needs done. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I see this as probably the first decision that we need to commit to is if we're gonna reconfigure grades or not. Because that's telling us what we're trying to look at in the future. And I think maybe we need to get a little bit more understanding or head, wrapped around the data associated with our middle schools. So we kind of have an understanding of, so we have a better vision of what direction that would go. But, obviously you're right. I mean, we've got a capital outlay plan, a very well thought out and developed capital outlay plan for every building in the district. And what you're holding there is just the 4 elementaries we're talking about. We've already shifted the carpet that was slated to go into Plymouth this summer and shifted it to another building, solely because it was $40-some thousand of carpet in a school that is being discussed as being closed. So we've got to make good decisions about what we're going to do with these buildings in the interim. So one point of that it wasn't in any of the models that we talked about. It was for the middle school that I would like to see some statistics from administration on is what would it take? Is it possible to just go K-6 through 8 in our 2 middle schools as is? What capacities does that put us at? I think that what we've talked about in these models that have been discussed is all 1 middle school or 2 evenly sized middle schools. Well, we all know we have about a 2-to-1 ratio. Horse Good has about twice the student population KH, and it's, my understanding, kind of been that way ever since the new high school was built. And I've asked a lot of people this, how do you feel about that? Is it necessary to have 2 equally sized middle schools? Well, I think a lot of the people that I've talked to think that that's a nice thing to work towards. It's not a deal breaker, I think, in a lot of people's minds. And I think if we had a better handle on what if we split, because right now, I mean, just looking at least the tables that I've looked at, I want to say our total functional capacity amongst our 2 middle schools is somewhere around 1,500, maybe just a little under. And our projected 6-8 numbers are just somewhere around 1,450 or something like that. So we're pretty close, but we're also pretty tight on capacity. But I'd really like to explore an option of moving into the middle schools as is, or with, say, an expansion project for whatever classroom size, maybe necessary KH. It could be achieved under a capital outlay program, and to where it's not dependent on a bond issue, and get us to where we can make that change. And then these elementary school discussions, that to me seems like the next layer of discussion, at least in my mind. What I'm concerned about, and I think you guys somebody hit on earlier, is I'm hearing such a strong desire from the community to reconfigure grades, to get away from the intermediate center model. But if all of that plan is contingent on a vote for a bond issue and taxpayers, allowing us to raise property taxes, and that's the only scenario where that's feasible, I don't know that it's gonna happen. And so I'd really like to see us dig deep and try to find scenarios to do this either through use of capital outlay funds over the next X number of years, possibly some sort of like lease purchase agreement that'll allow us to do that, but do it where we can manage that with our own funds and not have to do a bond issue to implement this grade reconfiguration.
Andy, you brought up the long-term planning and I don't want to put the administration on the spot here, but I would like the administration to kind of speak to the long-range planning a little bit, that we do have a committee, that we do have a 20-year plan, and just kind of speak to that process, because I think there were some comments in the public comments about, delaying some of that, and that, is there a plan? Was there a plan? Just speak to the district, and just that we do have a long-term planning committee. We have several people from the community on it.
Yeah, so we've had, since forever, we've had a long-range facility planning committee. I've served on the committee for around the last 10 years as a part of it. And we've always had a plan to address roofs. We've always had a plan to address HVAC. And in recent years, we've seen that plan kind of go awry because of mass inflation. I mean, Andy can probably speak to it better than most with construction costs, and things become more problematic when we're trying to budget in a time that's fairly turbulent. But we've always had that long-range plan in place. The thing I'll say is we've never had a plan like we have now. Shane Farrow has put together a plan that we couldn't even dream of, to be honest with you, 10 years ago. I mean, the detail that he has put to the plan, the numbers that he has put to the plan, he's figuring inflation, he's figuring in, everything. So we finally feel like for the first time, honestly, in a long time, we have a plan that we can trust, that addresses all those roofs, all the HVAC issues, those, what they call envelope issues. And that's the majority of the plan, is the envelope of the building. We don't have, as Andy alluded to, we don't have a master. And that's, part of the conversation that we've had as long-range facility group is we have this long-range facility plan, but it's really a long-range facility maintenance plan. And we're finally on track. Shane's finally got us on track to get those facilities up to a certain level that is acceptable to educate kids. There's been some facilities, I'm not going to use the word neglect because all buildings have been on the plan. It's just for a long time. I mean, you guys have been approving HVAC systems and roofs and those things for a long time. We probably weren't doing what we should have been doing with these buildings. And now we're addressing those issues, and those issues come at a significant price tag. And so putting together that plan like Shane has done, we can finally have a vision for 2035 and all the way out to 2035 on what roof we're doing in 2035 and 2034 and what HVACs we're doing and when windows are getting replaced and when we finally have that plan in place. So the plan is there. The plan is a lot more detailed and a lot more thorough than what we've had. When I will tell you, when we opened the new high school and did those alterations to a couple buildings, it kind of feels like as a district we kind of sat back and took a deep breath as a district and really didn't keep moving forward like we should have done with our buildings after that bond was passed and we got the high school built and APU got some adjustments to it and their early childhood center. It kind of feels like as a district we sat back and we're kind of reaping a little bit of that now, as you guys are well aware with roofs and HVAC systems and those. So from a history, I feel like we're in a better place now than we've ever been with being able to address those things. But there are, you guys are well aware, you guys have Shane went over it in a board meeting, and you guys are well aware of the costs coming down the road at multiple schools, not just ones that, we've talked a lot about, but there's multiple schools with big price tags coming down.
Well, the master plan and the vision, and you're right. So for the board, as far as directing the committee, we do need to know if it's a reconfiguration, is it K5, 6, 8? We do need to know that. We've talked to GMCN about what is if, and there's no equal. So if just try to get to classrooms, try to get to any, Andy, you know, we do classrooms, we have to do a storm shelter. The office kind of needs secure vestibules and that kind of stuff. So you're not just talking about 15 classrooms, you're talking about a storm shelter in the office area, which could be a restroom room, which is a storm shelter, those things. And that's going to be a price tag. Can we do it within our budget? Yes. Same thing, operating with all elementaries open. I don't know if that's, because we're going to be in the 40s on some of these capacities on these schools. Because when Stones goes on, as those are humongous schools, there's a lot of square footage there. We have 1.5 million square foot of roofs, 1.5 million square foot of carpet floor. That's a lot of money going out to take care of the thing. So versus just maintaining the vision of actually moving forward, that's two different things.
I don't think all at once, I mean, you guys are probably well aware of building costs. I don't think all at once we're gonna fix KH. You know, if that's the direction,
For sure.
the direction that people decide to go with a K5 model and a 612 model, it's gonna have to be a phased approach. I mean, Jessica's got some numbers today on a lease purchase. And what that would look like if we decided to go that direction. Dr. Dominguez has numbers on, you know, rough estimates on price tags of trying to not equally balance out, but get in the ballpark of KH and Horsegood, what that would look like on just a rough estimates. Because obviously those guys don't want to put a whole lot of time and energy into it because it costs them money too, but they can give us ballparks. Shane did a really good job with his numbers. He's pretty close to what they're thinking is, and Andy can probably speak more to that. I mean, it's the crazy thing that we're in right now is just building costs in Finney County is fairly significant right now. But you know, there are things that are doable that we can manage financially. That, like Dr. Dominguez spoke to, it's just the appetite of the board and the appetite of the community, whether it's, you know, however creative you guys decide to get with paying for it, it's a possible thing. It's something we can do, we think, without needing to go to a bond to do.
I just have the fear I have is I lived the Jenny Barker scare of 2016 or something, because my son was going to school there, and no, they were about to shut it down because there wasn't enough kids. And here, 6 years later, whatever, now it's the biggest overcrowded school we have. So that scares me a little bit when we talk about shutting all these buildings down. But I also understand the fiscal responsibilities that we have also.
I did ask, I asked Lana during, one point, you know, do you ask her where she sees residential growth continuing to develop? And, you know, everything they've given us says north and east. And I said, well, what about west? You know, what about south? And the feedback she gave me on that was the west side of town is the oldest part of town. The infrastructure, sewer, those sorts of things are the least capable of handling new development, and the cost to up that would be more significant than growing infrastructure to the east. And so she thinks that's going to be a cost prohibitive thing. It's going to prevent us seeing kind of a back build on the west side of town. And I asked her if she thought there was a chance of growing south of the river out of town more. And at least from a city perspective, it's development. And I guess my understanding of what she said was, at least in regard to development that's fed through like city utility services, that's pretty difficult and expensive to take water and sewer under the river to facilitate a development to the south. So, you know, as we talk about where we're gonna grow and everything of that sort, I mean, she seemed very confident that everything that this north and east trend that we're seeing is what we're gonna continue to see.
If this was a business decision, I think it'd be pretty easy. We'd be looking at revenues, we'd be looking at expenses, we'd be looking at age of some buildings, what would it cost to renovate them and all this, but it's not. John, you alluded to that. At some point in time, and what Andy said about we're going from 11 elementary, if we go to K5, 6, 8 to 13, that's a concern because yeah, we're looking at capacity then around 50%. Jackie said, talk about, you know, going down the road, we'll probably be looking at some school repurposing or closures. I think that's a reality. I think a deadline is going to be very important for us to have out there to keep us on task. I also think that whatever decision we make, when we make a decision, whatever the decision is on reconfiguration, on boundary study, get to the point where we're looking at possibly repurposing some buildings, we have got to communicate our reasons why, and it has to be done very well to the community. So hopefully it'll take some of the emotion, because there's emotion out there. You all know that, you've seen it. It'll take some of that out of the balloon, so to speak. And you know, there's some reasoning why we're doing what we're doing, and we have data to back up why we're doing what we're doing. It's just not something that we've decided for whatever reason. It's data driven, and we're gonna have to communicate that very well, because I really feel that what has happened recently, we have not done the best job of communicating to the community so they knew what was going on. And this thing did evolve from boundary study to reconfiguration to repurposing, closure, possible closure of schools, et cetera. So it just kind of snowballed, it seemed like to me. And whatever we do, we got to communicate it well. We have to have good reasoning for whatever we do. And the students, I mean, I think we're doing a pretty good job of educating students. Transportation is one thing I got some emails about, talked to some folks about how long you want a kindergartner on the school bus. First grader, how long you want them on the school bus? Well, I can tell you the parents don't want them on there for an hour, one way and an hour back. So, you know, there's a lot of things to factor which have nothing to do, well, they do have to do with financial, but the decision is more than just a financial decision. I'm not ready to make a decision on all this in May to answer. I think you asked that to begin with. I do think we do need to stair step this, so to speak, and do we want to reconfigure the grades? Do we want to, you know, in the boundary study along with that, and then go from there? But we do need to have some sort of deadline to keep us on task. And sometimes that deadline is not always set in stone, because you can come up with some other things that come up, variables that we're not taking into consideration that may change that, but we do need to have that. But May is not, I'm not ready for that.
And the only reason I speak to the deadline a little bit of needing to move that, you know, I think the slide from RSP says that, you know, get to the exact wording.
And when I say that, I guess, I mean, I'm talking about the options that they have out there
Yeah.
right now available to the entire option.
Yeah.
Part of it possibly when we're looking at maybe some reconfiguration and boundary study information.
I mean, if you look at the RSP sheet, which I think it says right in here that it was a boundary plan, but the Board of Education adopts a boundary plan in 25, 26 and for implementation in May of 2024. And I think from going from a boundary to a reconfiguration, we got to take more time to look at more detail to get to that, to get to wherever we're headed.
Well, and I know a few of the people that I talked to that were, you know, adamant they didn't want to close any schools. And then I said, well, what are we gonna do with the 2 schools that are empty? And like some of them hadn't really thought that part through. It was just oh my gosh, you're gonna close these schools. What does that mean? It was like, if we're shifting kids out, we have 2 of the newer schools, larger schools empty. What do you think we should do with those? And I think if we had communicated that a little bit better from the beginning, people would have understood a little bit better about why we need to move these kids from this school to another, because we have these nicer, newer, maybe nicer is not the right word, newer, larger facilities that are going to be sitting there empty. That doesn't get rid of the pain in their heartstrings. And I I agree with what Nathan said earlier about the culture and I'm like, I'm kind of 50-50 on what I think we should do about closing some of these schools, but I asked someone, I was like, well, can't you recreate that culture in a different building? Because the culture's the people, not the building. And I think there's just some fear of what's gonna happen to, are we gonna all get to stay together and who's gonna be our principal? And I didn't have good answers for that because if they're like, if we combine 2 to 3 schools, there's 2 to 3 principals, who gets to be the principal? And I didn't have a good answer for that. I don't think we do have a good answer.
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten to that point. Or Mike's gotten to that point.
That's right.
So Josh ain't here, but he and I talked a little bit about, but can you guys, the district, kind of walk me through what it would look like to expand the early childhood? Like, what kind of facility does that take? Is it, I mean, I don't know anything really about that.
Yeah, so we talked about that, a little bit today with Gibson Mancini and, there's not the adjustments that there used to be. There used to be, you go in and you put smaller size toilets, smaller size sinks, and that model's kind of gone away because those kids are gonna go home and they're not going into the bathroom on a smaller size toilet or washing their hands at a smaller size sink. They think assuming the logical thing would be, in my mind, the logical thing is to move to Charleston, if that's what we were to do. There would be very minimal adjustments to VO to make it an early childhood center. There would be some, you'd still want to fix the vestibules and you'd still want to do those things, but
Based on playground.
yeah,
things too,
new
like
playgrounds, so
Stone.
it was age appropriate, those sorts of things. And then over at Stone's, looking at the kindergarten classrooms, that's one thing that you would have to take into mind is kindergarten classrooms. And then, obviously Stone's doesn't have a playground like VO has a playground. So those sorts of things would have to be addressed, but it's not like what we used to do to buildings where you go in, rip out all the big toilets and put small toilets and rip out all the tall sinks and put short sinks.
Yeah, and I'd like us to consider if leaving VO and Stone's as elementary schools. Because I think with the growth we're seeing, and having those elementaries on the east side, and VO being one of our bigger elementary schools to begin with, is critical for us to be able to handle its growth out there. I don't know if a building like George Matthews would serve well.
That's the first one that popped in my mind.
Yeah,
George
would
Matthews.
serve as a pre-K center, and how long that could serve us. I mean, I know Josh has talked about state mandating all-day preschool, and currently we run an AM and PM, and how that basically doubles the need for preschool just if that were to go into effect. So, yeah, in my mind, as I've kind of kept around options and scenarios, I tend to think VO and Stone's both are elementary schools.
So it goes
on different territories.
Yeah, it just goes back to that conversation of, you're essentially bringing on 2 elementary schools that can house anywhere from 900 to 1,100 students, and kind of the effect that that's going to have on your percentage of capacity.
Makes the capacity problem worse.
Yeah.
But if you look, I tend to agree with Andy. I mean, if you look at Stone's and VO and Florence Wilson and Bernadine Sitz, those are 4 of our biggest buildings, and they're in our northeast region. And I mean, I think those buildings are poised for our growth. You know what I mean? As far as elementary schools, I don't think that we would want to take one of those bigger schools out of play from an elementary standpoint. And because then if the community continues to grow to that way, then we're going to be over capacity on our north and east side again. But I mean, those 4 buildings are strategically positioned kind of for north and east growth. And my personal opinion is we would want to utilize those for elementaries, not early childhood. But
I agree.
Well, and just so everybody knows, Garfield has 26 classrooms, and it is an AM, PM, and they are all used. So George Matthews, 12. So and that's, you know, it's a nice building, it just happens to be small.
Anything else? Conversation, I mean, does anybody else have anything that they want to add this evening? I mean, I just wanted to kind of have a meeting and just have kind of open board discussion and allow the community to kind of hear a little bit of, you know, hey, we want to slow the process down just a little bit. And then also just maybe a little bit of what we want out of the last committee meeting, you know what I mean, as far as what direction they want to kind of push us and then, or lead us, and then we can start getting to work after that.
I know one comment that I heard, like you had said about staff's concerns. Can you guys speak a little bit about, if we consolidate schools, will that help us in any way in regard to unfilled teaching positions?
Yeah, it will. What it does is that, and I'm not advocating one way or another, but you have a bunch of specials that right now are splitting between multiple schools. When you consolidate, you're obviously reducing the number of transitions of those art teachers or PE teachers, those kinds of folks. And the classroom teacher is going to be the classroom teacher, whether it's at Charles Stone's or at Abe Hubert or at, you know, the classroom teacher is the classroom teacher. As we do this, we can get more efficient with the use of it, but you're not going to see a dramatic effect on the elementary classroom teacher. It's going to be the specials, the music, the art, the PE, those people that you see the biggest effect on efficiency. You know, we have some PE people that may go to 3 buildings, 3 different buildings in a week or 2 in a day. You can start to reduce that and kind of get a little more efficient with your use of those positions.
And as Pastor Heck alluded to, class sizes are set by the board, so there are not going to be larger classes. They're not. They'll be the same size in those. If there's 100 kids, there's still 100 kids, and there's still going to be 1 to 20 or 1 to 24, whatever that looks like, depending on the grade band that they're with. So it's not going to be a larger number of students per teacher. It's not. It's going to be roughly the same. If anything, it'll be a little bit lower. I mean, we can't really say that until it's done. As far as what does the committee give to the board, what does the board give to us to flesh out that the number is the number. It's not going to go higher than that number. This point.
Yeah, we're always going to need X number of elementary teachers to educate. You know, 470 first graders. I mean, so that 470 first graders it's the same number we're going to need next year to educate 470 second graders. So those numbers really are what those numbers are. We're not. Over time, as we've lost students, we've put those positions on hold. We're sitting there in case we gain students. So it's not like we have people in these positions that have to reduce or add to.
One other comment that I had heard multiple times from staff at some of these type of buildings was that being your staff together. You know, I had a couple of different people that offered suggestion of if we have to be consolidated, can you pair us with another school so we can create a new, fresh identity for ourselves, and not leave people with the feeling of just being kind of absorbed or dissolved into another school. That was a theme I heard several times. You know, I had a couple different teachers say it's not about the brick and mortar, but like try to keep our staff together. So I think that's something we really need to think hard about if we get to that point. and how we can look at doing that.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a pretty common theme from the teachers I've spoke with.
Yep.
And we've spoke with is, trying to keep together as a group and the community and the staffs.
The one thing that makes me hopeful is that we had, well, I don't know, 400 and something emails. So obviously that many people that care about it. And I'm hopeful that moving forward, that same number of people stay interested and involved when it's not just something that they consider negative. And that we can build some good support and interaction, because I mean, we know lots of times this room is empty when we have a meeting. So looking for some of the positives that could come out of this.
And I've received some phone calls and some emails from community members that, maybe served in this position in the past, or, own a fair amount of property in the community. And, the sentiment among those folks was like, hey, the 5-6 model is something that, maybe we wished we'd have changed when we were on the board 20 years ago. So I think this has been a long-term discussion in the community, and I think there's a lot of support, or a lot of people in the community that would like to see that model changed. And I think there's a lot of people that, own a lot of property in this community that pay a tremendous amount of property tax that have had the conversation as well of, hey, whatever, we support you, whatever you do, just like, don't raise our taxes. You know what I mean? We're already at a tremendous high rate here in Finney County, and we don't want our taxes raised anymore. So, I mean, there's been, we had our forums and our public input, and since then, over the weekend, I've had a lot of people roll emails to us, or phone calls to us, or people I've talked to in person that, are on somewhat of the, hey, don't raise my taxes and do something. It's kind of a tough situation to put a board, put your board in, and they say that, like, hey, we know that's not easy to do both, but we know that you guys can figure it out, so.
I think you guys are in a unique position just from, there's a whole lot of stuff that is getting put on the table right now, from roof stage backs to windows to reconfiguration to, so I don't think anybody in the community envies you guys at all. So I know people probably don't tell you enough, but we do appreciate you guys and what you guys do, and we know you got some hard decisions.
Well, and I think it needs to be noted too. I mean, there's been a lot of opposition, obviously, but I've also had a lot of people support RSP's model and think it's a good idea what they're proposing. So, I have had that. I've had people support it, think it's a good idea. It's a good plan moving forward. So it's not just all the opposition. I have had people that support their plan too, so.
Well, and I think one obstacle that we face that I don't know how we control, but I've had a lot of people come to me with very false information. Nathan alluded to that a little bit. To some, the numbers from the hospital of the live births. And obviously that's not where RSP got their birth information from. They got it from the state. And what we're gonna do with the buildings afterwards, if they're closed, that some of them are just so outlandish. But these people believe them, and I don't know where the information's coming from. And so I was very adamant to the people, you know what, that's false information, and please don't spread it. Information's important and it's powerful, but make sure what you're spreading is the truth.
And I think the city and county numbers have merit, and so does RSPs. I mean, they're have very different directions that they go about, for their data. And I don't think, neither are wrong. It's just different approaches, just different things we have to consider of all the possibilities.
And there is the unknown of what we don't know about future development that obviously economic development has, and the city have that information. And hopefully they're right, you know, hopefully they're right.
I'd like to hope that we have all the 3,000 houses in the next, but I mean,
Yeah, that's a big number.
I mean, it's expensive to buy groceries, much less big, you know, build a house or.
I was just gonna say, it's easy to hear about the negative, but remember all the positive, what Randy alluded to there. I've had many good conversations about when I've sat down with people in my office and talked to them through the process, they're like, okay, I understand. I get it. And so, whatever we decide, you know, I mean, there's still a lot of good comments out there, I guess, and people understand, we explain the reality of it. And that's why I said we need to give the why, you know. And I think we as a community can get behind that. If we have a good why we're doing it. So.
I think we have a good, solid board. I'm proud to be a member of this board. I appreciate all the people on here. We have different strengths that we bring, I think, that build a solid foundation. So,
You can look at this also from the negative side. I mean, we have this year, we have these problems. We also have an opportunity to get this thing right, you know, and do something good for this community, for our students, the administration, the teachers and everybody. And I have no grand illusion that we're gonna have some great big party for it when it's over, okay? Or we're gonna get a whole bunch of thank yous. I have no grand illusion, but I think it's an opportunity to get these things right and to further the educational process we have here in Garden City.
And I would add to that I think it's an opportunity for us to set the district to be successful for 10 to 15 years in the future. You know what I mean? Not looking at this as a 1 to 2 or 3 to 5 even, you know, I mean, this is trying to be visionaries a little bit and try to set the district up to be successful 10 to 15 years from now.
Yeah, because we don't want either us or another board visiting this again in 5, 6 years. Hopefully we can get it right so that, yeah, you're like talking 10, 15, 20 years out. And the community will change in that time. We'll see whether RSP's numbers are right or the cities are right in economic development or it's somewhere in between.
I think it needs to be a goal of the board, whoever the board might be in 5, 6 years, that, you know, boundaries are looked at before it gets to this, what it is now.
Yeah.
I just think that 10 years is way too, I mean, too many things change in 10 years that, I mean, it's something that needs to be evaluated maybe every 4 to 5 years rather than 10 to 15.
So have anything, any administrators have anything that they'd like to add to the conversation?
You know, I guess I would ask what do you want to relay? The committee does have a May 2nd meeting. So one of those things and the hard, frankly, hard discussion, you know, hard lands, it really is it, what is the boundary? What is a great configuration? And then as Randy said, we say K568, then RSP can draw a boundary pretty, I would say, I don't work for them. I would say they would draw that pretty quickly, and even with the projected growth. So going back to 4 to 5 years, yes, probably need to be looking at that, have a pulse on it, not wait 10 years. But I mean, direction to the committee, because as once again, I think Pastor Heck said, or Randy said, someone voted and they were like, oh, this has ramifications in that committee meeting, you know, that I said, one track model may not be the best, and oh, wait, had ramifications. So the committee volunteered. It was a boundary study, absolutely 100%. Grow to something different. I think they just need a little I don't know what that direction looks like, but there needs some direction, and three of you guys are on it, but, and y'all might be able to, speak up, but, really, can the committee even come up with one or two possible proposals for the board? You know, I don't know if that's reasonable at this juncture. As Randy said, 130% capacity that's what started all of this for one of our buildings.
You know, I'd like to see maybe some of those surveys that was done in the committee 2 meetings ago, maybe those surveys redone now after there's a lot of other factors considered. You know, see what the committee feels now. With options being put out there.
Well, I had a lot of people, well, not a lot, but 4 or 5 people say to me that if they were, do you like scenario 1 or scenario 2 the best? And they were like, I didn't like either one, but I voted for which one I liked the best, not understanding the implications of that vote. If they were like, I just wouldn't have voted for either one, and if 20 people in the room didn't vote, that would have sent a message, but I don't think they understood that was an option.
There is on some of those questions, you can see it's not a consistent number that voted.
Right.
But I think maybe that on some of those. You know, just to see what the feeling would be now, knowing some of the options and what it would be.
I like that suggestion. Because I do think the conversation is evolved through this, and you know, your thinking changes as these topics are brought up and further vetted. So I think that gives us a lot of really good perspective.
So we might have to kind of redo some of those committee questions maybe and redo some of that. We did vote as a board 7-0 to reconfigure. Maybe not, you know, and that was based off of what the committee recommended to us. The committee kind of came to us and said, hey, they voted, I don't remember what percent, I was looking for it right here.
It was unanimous, I think.
It was a pretty high percentage.
It was unanimous.
Yeah,
Use 100%.
100% to reconfigure.
568.
So I don't know, my concern of backtracking a little bit on that, but at the same time, I understand when people voted for that, they may not have understood, or it may not have been communicated to them what the full ramifications of that were.
I don't think we gave you a very good answer.
John, I'll push back on that idea a little. I don't, I guess it wasn't my interpretation that we were voting to commit to reconfiguration. What we were voting to was
For them
to,
to look at.
for them to look at it and then for us to expand RSP services to allow that to happen.
I would agree with that. That's how I took it.
That's how I took it too.
Fair
And
enough.
I think with them I think with only 1 meeting left, I don't know that. I think we can continue on and do whatever we feel we need to do. Without RSP, I think we have numbers, we have, information that we can decide on how we want to do things in a time frame that we think will work.
One thing, if we do go with the questioning again and re-ask the questions, which I understand completely the idea behind it, but resend out the invitation to all schools, make sure they have representation there.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would say. We do that. I understand it. I appreciate it, but I think at least one, well, at least one school that I know didn't have never had anybody there.
Right.
So now that was on them. They were given that opportunity. But with the stakes at hand right now, I think we need to make sure that everybody's represented.
We have everybody's, we send that out, yes, every time.
My thing is, I don't know how much longer we make the committee continue. I'm sure they're probably about done, you know, so we can just give them some direction on what we're looking for in the short term right now, and then we pick up the ball and run with it after that.
So I guess we should just ask around the table a little bit. Who would be in favor of a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 model for direction? Maybe they figure out how to make, what that looks like, and then possibly the second question on that would be, you know, 1 versus 2 middle schools.
And we'd have to need a boundary and still, you know.
Right.
That's where I'm at. We just,
I would agree with you.
I think that gives the committee a direction to go.
Can you say that again?
Basically, just kind of ask the board a little bit of direction for the committee, whether you're at a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 model. And if you're in favor of 1 versus 2 middle schools, just to kind of give them a little bit of direction to move forward with what they would bring as a recommendation to the board. And I understand some of that's extremely hard to ask of you guys because we don't have the data, you know what I mean, or what that's gonna look like. I mean, that was my opening statements, like I'm all in favor of a K-5, 6, 8, but I also know the ramification of what that possibly means, you know.
I think it's a fair question to ask them. I mean, because what I believe we're asking them to do is to tell us what their preference is. And then it's us to figure out if it's feasible or not.
And I don't know if it's possible to give that committee, but Shane's sheet that we had that showed the conditions of buildings and projections, that may be something good for
Yes.
a financial piece to have for that committee to look at, to see the reality of what some things are in the next 5 to 10 years.
And that is one thing I heard from some folks, they didn't have any of those numbers to look at. So they had to have absolutely no idea what we were looking at.
Kind of, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was asking is.
You're asking the boards.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
kind of the
So,
board,
a consensus
like a little
on
bit
it.
of a consensus to give direction to the committee. All I was asking.
Want me to start?
Sure.
I would be for K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12, 2 middle schools.
I agree with what you said. Let's further look at that. And I agree with her on what she said. Yeah.
With it.
Two, pretty much, it's a consensus of the.
There you go.
To
Perfect.
give direction to your committee.
Yep. That was good.
And is that with, if we do that, redrawing boundaries with what's open?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have.
You're always gonna have the 2 intermediate centers. We gotta do something with them.
So.
Whether it's early childhood, elementary, whatever. Everybody knows if we go away from the 5, 6 model, those 2 buildings are empty. We gotta do something.
So we'll have them draw it as is on early childhood center where it's at. And everything else as elementary.
Say 5, 6, 8, yep.
So you guys.
And that would be easy, and then the same thing if and when north, east, northeast, all those kids come, we'll be ready.
So you're gonna ask RSP to draw us boundaries based off 13 elementary schools? Well, I don't see how that helps us. All right, which, I guess tell me which ones not to, Not
Well,
to-
I'm just thinking
Oh.
where I'm at is, I think if we're talking solely on how do we wanna utilize, how do we wanna ask the community to utilize like the last meeting?
I'd like to have their input on what they think we should do with those two schools.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think, yeah, or just maybe.
Whether you make one early childhood or whatever, I'd like their input on.
So have the committee decide what to do with the schools and then draw the boundaries.
I don't think we're gonna get boundaries out of this.
I thought you guys wanted the percentage of.
I would like that, but I don't know if you're gonna get
We
it
got where
accurate.
we're at today, in my mind, I mean, we got one meeting left, I think all I'm hoping for is the committee to tell us how they feel about K-5, 6, 8 model and utilize and having two middle schools, whether they're in favor of that or not in favor of that. I think getting into the weeds of how many elementaries are left, do we have an early education center, what do boundaries look like? That's all down the road, stuff that I think we have to figure out as a board. I think that's too tall of a, I don't think, I think that's too much to try to glean from a one more committee meeting.
Okay, but, and just so we're all clear, so. Yeah, I think Randy and then Robin came back with K-5, 6, 8, 2 middle schools. But as far as following next year, it's not even for next year anyway, they could draw a boundary and everybody look and see that. But I mean, at some point, you do want to offload or end RSP relationship, I mean, or we just keep going.
And like you said, or Nathan said, I don't wanna leave that open-ended. I think we have to wrap up our contract work with them. But I wouudn't be in favor of changing boundaries for next year, not with something else potentially. I don't wanna do something and then change it again in 2 years. I would like to ask, how do you all as administration feel with just coming into next school year? Maybe even the year after that, do the transfers with just how we've handled this year and the last few years. And then, if ultimately we've got RSP under contract to draw us boundaries when we get this all figured out, I think come back and draw boundaries for us or advise us on boundaries, that'd be great.
Okay.
If that's
All right.
within the scope of their work. I don't know how you guys feel about all that comment.
Yeah.
I think ultimately there's just too many factors.
There's a lot.
I mean, and that's what makes it really hard. Like, I think Randy said it, and I think Randy's spot on. I think if you took a poll of how many committee members wanted to meet on May 2nd, I bet it would be pretty low. And I think they realize there's so many factors in this deal now. I mean, so it's basically it's gonna have to get to a point like, okay, what direction do we want to go? And then we have to work through the data and work through the decision-making process to get there.
Time-wise, what timeline, what are we looking at? We're not looking at next fall for reconfiguration of grades. Yeah, we're looking down the road, maybe 1.6. Okay, I didn't make sure that's clear.
At the earliest,
And out there too, so we're not looking at doing something this fall.
Really, Jenny Barker's the only school that's struggling with the overcapacity. Can they survive one more year like this?
Well, and the same thing, we did move some kids out, we just have to do that.
Transfers.
Do the transfers.
Jenny Barker and Gertrude Walker, both Jenny Wilson. Really high. I just climb Mountain View.
I appreciate everybody coming tonight. I know it's one extra night. But I wanted to have a meeting and just kind of talk about it, kind of in a board retreat to where the public could be invited to listen to the board kind of visit and think about, they could hear everything that we're kind of thinking about. And I know everything that administration's thinking about, there's a ton of work going on behind the scenes. And anyway, just wanted to kind of have a meeting and have it out in the open to discuss. So if nobody's got anything else. Motion.
Appreciate all the staff and that they feel like, I'm working on all the questions you've answered.
as we've had questions, so thank you all.
Absolutely.
Gave you guys the, our budget compared to Dodge's budget. Just remember, we sport away, that's the state.
Just saying. And Josh would have liked to have been here. He had death in the family, so he had to go to Wyoming. He'll be back later in the week.
President, I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded that we do that. More discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.